Joining us here tonight on closing arguments, and we are getting closer and closer to those closing arguments in the Karen Read murder trial. Prosecutors very close to wrapping up, then a quick defense case, and then we'll be there. In the meantime, let's talk about killers and how killers react. We've seen this on Court TV many times. Evidence about the demeanor and the actions and reactions of accused killers after the crime. Were they crying? Were they emotional? Were they cold? How were they acting? All of that always considered significant evidence, right? For the jury to wonder, did this person do it? Especially in cases where you're talking about spousal murder or boyfriend, girlfriend, you know, people that are together as a couple and one is accused of killing the other. We always examine and analyze the reaction of the accused, the other half of the couple. Now, remember Alec Murdaugh? How did he react? I mean, he told us over and over again how much he loved Maggie and Paw Paw. He loved them, right? And he said, I could never kill them because I love them so much. My wife and my son. I would never even consider doing that because I love Maggie and Paw Paw. And that's what a lot of accused killers end up doing, right? That's the way they react in the moments afterwards, or if they're staging something, they are going to put together, you know, a front, a facade, or stage some evidence that will make it look like there is no way in the world they would ever do harm to their loved one because they love them so much. So that brings us to Karen Read. How did she cover up the murder here? How did she react to all of this? In the moments just after, right? The moments just after she allegedly runs over John O'Keefe on purpose, sees him in that backup mirror, throws it in reverse and guns it, knocks him down, leaves him there to die. What does she do right after that? Does she do anything to try to cover it up, to make it look like I would never, ever harm John? I love John. He was a great man. We were a couple. We had a future together. He was my boyfriend. He was doing such a wonderful job raising those kids. Is that what she did? No, today we learned from the prosecutor what she did. She was leaving a series of voicemail messages, and the big theme of these messages were, I hate you. So here we are tonight, sitting here, and we've got an accused murderer, minutes after the murder, leaving a voicemail message on the victim's cell phone, telling them how much she hates him. These are the facts. These are the facts that the jury is going to have to wrangle and figure out. Let's bring in Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, who is live, of course, outside the courthouse in Dedham, Massachusetts. Matt, what a dramatic day today from start to finish. Let's begin with those voicemails, because it's not just one voicemail, it's a series of voicemails.
At least 8 voicemails. You're right, Vinny. Big day here for the Commonwealth with key evidence presented to this jury. This was evidence that we were much anticipating ever since all of the pretrial hearings, these voicemails from defendant Karen Read on the morning, those early hours of the 29th, when she is allegedly searching for her boyfriend. She doesn't know where he is, but prosecutors say that she hit him on purpose and then made the calls. Take a listen.
Now, as far as this first voicemail, what time did this occur?
12:37 a.m.
And with the court's permission, if I could play that for the jury.
Yes.
Third message, what time is that received?
12:59.
John, I'm telling you, kid. Nobody knows what the you want. Pervert.
With regard to the fifth message, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
1:11 a.m.
Yes, 1 in the morning. I'm with your niece and nephew. You pervert. You're a pervert.
And the sixth message, sir, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
1:18 a.m.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit me. I need to go home. You have using me right now. You're another girl. He's sleeping next to me. You're a loser. Self.
The seventh message, sir, what time was that received by Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
5:23 a.m.
And in court today, I'm looking over at the jury box, the 15 that are hearing the case right now. You had no one taking notes during all of that. It was actually kind of hard to hear. So some people were closing their eyes and listening. Now, the O'Keefe family, they may have heard these already before because you had Peggy O'Keefe that was shaking her head and she was being comforted by other family members. But as for the jury, we saw bigger reactions when Trooper Proctor was on the stand reading his text messages about the defendant.
And again, this is an issue that can cut both ways. It shows that there are problems in this relationship. Obviously, there is anger. There's a level of rage in those calls. But if you just murdered someone, would you leave those messages? I don't know how the jury figures that out, but they will. Okay. I said it was a big day from start to finish. We also had medical experts testifying for the prosecution.
Yeah, this is really huge. We had two doctors with the medical examiner's office, and the first one was Dr. Renee Stonebridge. Now, she detailed all of the injuries to John O'Keefe. Here's what she testified to. Take a listen.
You mentioned that your findings were that the injuries were acute and that the injuries were the result of trauma, correct?
Yes.
What, if anything, can you say or can you opine as to the mechanism for those acute traumatic injuries?
It was something that required some type of force, given that there were skull fractures. I can't say what type of force or how much force, but it was definitely something that caused some type of force, which led to the skull fractures and then the subsequent brain findings.
And the brain findings in particular that you made, were those consistent with the fall?
They can be, yes.
So then day 28 ended with the actual medical examiner on the stand, looking at the jury, talking about her findings in her report. Now, she said that his injuries, she didn't say that they were consistent with a vehicle pedestrian crash, but she did say that they were not consistent with a fight. Here's that testimony.
It's called raccoon eye because it resembles, I guess, what raccoon eyes look like. But emergency room physicians are always alerted to any hemorrhage and any bleeding around the eyes because it could signify or it could mean that there's a much bigger injury inside the skull and that is not just some bleeding around the eyes, that it actually is associated with a skull fracture. In my opinion, I believe the impact, the injury to the head came first. Mr. O'Keefe was most likely incapacitated or unable to move into a warmer environment, and then the hypothermia set in. I didn't see any major signs of what I would call a significant altercation.
They're very consistent with a physical altercation. She's not really, punching that up. That's not her bailiwick. That's not what she's there for. So she's going to say, yeah, I didn't really see anything super consistent, but she also can't answer, why is there a laceration? Why are there lacerations on the nose? Why is there a laceration on the tongue? Why are both of his eyes black? There's multiple reasons for the black eyes. There's not multiple reasons for the defensive wounds, the laceration on the eye, the eyebrow, the lacerations on the nose and things like that. So the real evidence, the rest of the evidence is yet to come with our witnesses. So just stand by.
Defense attorney Alan Jackson there also telling us that he has at least 2 medical professionals that are going to take the stand in his case in chief, which could start tomorrow afternoon. The Emmy is back on the stand first thing in the morning. She's going to go over the pictures yet again, these autopsy photos that this jury has already seen. But we think that the Commonwealth is going to rest after her testimony.
We're at the end of the prosecution's case. This is unreal. It's been a long, long case. Sometimes you don't think you'll ever get there, but they will be getting there. Now, another really significant witness, and I think really important, especially for prosecutors if the jury believes and trusts his testimony, was a testimony related to the information that they were able to extract and get from the victim, John O'Keefe's phone. Let's talk about that.
So that's Trooper Guarino, who was first up on the stand today, beginning day 28. He was finishing his testimony from Tuesday. Remember, there was 2 dark days for this jury. So he was going over the extraction report for John O'Keefe's cell phone. And he really was outlining the map that he built from that data to 34 Fairview, how the phone stayed in the yard. He says that it never went inside that house, but there were questions as to whether or not a health app on John O'Keefe's phone showed him ascending and descending at least 3 stairs, three sets of stairs, rather. Take a listen.
It's about 3 seconds where it actually encompasses the inside of Fairview. That 4th second, it's right on the edge of the corner of the house. And then the 5th and 6th second, they're just showing the front yard.
And that time period, as far as those GPS data from those circles, with reference to the following time periods after those, what, if any, opinions were you able to draw from sort of that data?
So he would have to go from the GPS point that's listed. It would take him, 1.5 seconds to get to the house, and then 1.5 seconds back where his body was found, where his phone was underneath him. He'd have to go about 48 feet a second when I did a velocity calculation, which is about 32 miles an hour. 1 second to the house, 1 second back. There was no GPS points ever showing inside the home.
As far as his specific physical location at the time that it indicates ascending and descending, how far away from 34 Fairview Road was it when it registered that?
It's over a half mile away.
Sir, are you aware that apps on an iPhone may pull data from 3 different clocks when they're timestamping location data?
You mean like Mac Absolute Time or Apple Coca-Cola Time?
I'm asking you. Are you aware?
Multiple timestamps that are in an iPhone, correct?
That's not my question. My question was, are you aware that an app on an iPhone may pull data by choosing from 3 different clocks when it timestamps location data?
Yes.
I want you to assume for a moment, Trooper, that John O'Keefe's phone location actually showed him on Oakdale Road 3 minutes earlier at 12:19 a.m. Okay? Do you have that in mind?
You okay?
All right. With that assumption, would you agree with me that the Apple Health data about him taking 80 steps and climbing up or down 3 floors at 34 Fairview Road would make more sense?
Objection.
This is the 2nd or 3rd time that this jury has been told to believe everything in the cell phone report except 1 or 2 things on the report. Remember, the other main witness is Jen McCabe, and the search history, How's Long to Die in the Cold, 227, it shows up on our Celebrite report, and then it shows deleted, and Commonwealth says don't believe that. So we do know that we are in the middle of the battle of the experts. We talk about that a lot, Vinny, and we know that the defense team is going to have their own experts for cell phone and also crash reconstructionists and medical professionals.
Yeah, and this expert, Trooper Guarino, if the jury believes him, because he's basically saying Trooper John O'Keefe never went in the house. And if the jury believes that Trooper John O'Keefe never went in the house, I think there's like only one logical conclusion that this jury can draw as to how he died, and it has something to do with Karen Reed's black SUV. So crucial testimony, crucial cross-examination, a crucial battle of the experts. Matt Johnson in the middle of it all. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you.
All right, folks, let's bring in Rick Grundy. Great attorney, has prosecuted cases inside that courthouse right here on Court TV. It was many years ago. Rick, great to see you again. Let me ask you this. Are you surprised in this case, or in any case, there is such a discrepancy apparently between experts on digital evidence? Not like, you know, interpreting a wound or something like that. I get that. But I thought the whole point of digital evidence that it's like ones and zeros, it's black and white, it is what it is. But in this case, we're hearing it isn't what it is. You know, it's up for interpretation, apparently.
I think part of the problem, Benny, is what we're dealing with here is actually, it is new. It's certainly new to the court systems and the people who are coming forth as experts. A trooper is getting rudimentary courses in how to, they don't understand exactly how the mechanisms are pulling this information. They're taught how to run it through a program. The information is spit out. They interpret it. So there's going to be any number of interpretations with that along the lines. Any one of us that uses our phones constantly throughout the entire day probably understands, well, uses maybe 1/1000th of what it can do and understands less than that. So these folks know a little bit more, but it's easy to bring people in that are going to counter it because it's far from an exact science, and it's far from something that juries are going to pick up and understand if you got into it too deeply. That's part of the problem with expert, you know, if you're really going to rely on experts.
I understand, but I always thought, right, going into this, because we've covered a lot of trials in the last 5 years since the relaunch of this network. And you know, the phones and the digital evidence is always a big part of it. But I've never seen a case where, like, you know, the extractions that are done, oh, that's not what it means. That, like, the sides aren't agreeing. I haven't seen it to this level. They always try to come up with, well, it could be this or that, da-da-da. But not like these are like the reports. No, he wasn't there, especially with locations.
Well, I think, again, with the power of these machines and what they can do, there's always going to be multiple explanations for what they can do, what they did do. And the more people that are getting into the science of these diagnostics, the more experts there are going to be out there. To go back to kind of the Stone Age, I never had a case where there wasn't a medical examiner who wasn't going to counter my medical examiner. They're out there, they're for hire. My favorite was they'd come down and say that the person died from myocarditis, which means the heart stopped. Okay. But you've got a lot of people out there right now dealing with cell phones, computers, who know just a bit more than the average user. But these are not people that are constructing. They're not technically completely understanding how the machines do it themselves. So there's all kinds of timestamps throughout a phone or a computer. Understanding how one timestamp ends up on a particular piece of information is pretty complicated. And it's easier just to say, I understand there are 3 timestamps that are available.
Yeah, I think this is going to be difficult for the jury. I really think it's going to be difficult for the jury in trying to figure this all out. All right, Rick, you're going to stay with us. We've got the whole hour. We're going to bring in our insiders plus coming up next hour. A major development in the search for missing 2-year-old Soraya Ung. Her father, Aaron, is wanted, and now the FBI has raided Aaron's parents' home in Moscow, Idaho. We have the latest. On the next episode of Accomplice to Murder.
I got a wife that's been murdered.
Sherry Malarick was found shot to death inside her minivan.
I got a husband that the last person to see her alive.
We believed we had the evidence.
And then you get the bombshell. There's a girlfriend in the mix.
I knew right then he had me, and I didn't know what else to do.
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan. All new episode, Sunday night, 8/7 Central.
Only on Court TV.
What, if any, movement did you observe following 12:25 a.m. until the period of 6:15 a.m.?
None until it was found at 6:15.
Okay, this is important testimony. If the jury believes this, if the jury believes and trusts this expert and this expert's testimony, that there's no movement from John O'Keefe from 12:25 to 6:15 a.m., that means he never goes inside the house. He never goes inside the house. If he doesn't go inside the house, there's no other real reasonable explanation for what happened to John O'Keefe. None, other than being struck by Karen Reed's car, either accidentally or on purpose. So this is crucial. This is important. Everything is at stake here for the defense, and the prosecution can win the case if they can convince this jury to trust this testimony. But take a look now at the cross-examination, part of the cross-examination of this expert.
The Apple Health data also showed a total of 80 steps between 12:21 and 12:24.
Correct.
As part of your investigation of this case, were you aware that there was a 12:23 text message from Ryan Nagel to Julie Nagel in which Ryan texted his sister Julie he had arrived at 34 Fairview?
Objection.
Okay, you got to put some pieces together here. Why is it important that Ryan Nagel texts his sister that he arrived at 12:23? Well, first, they're in conjunction with when the alleged steps are taken by John O'Keefe, and then you have this testimony from Ryan Nagel.
At any point, did you see that SUV in front of you drive up 50 or 60 feet, slam into reverse, and then drive backward?
No.
Okay. At any point, did you see that SUV reverse and hit a pedestrian?
Objection.
Sir.
I'll allow that. You didn't see that, right?
No.
At no point did you see a person laying on the lawn?
No, but I also wasn't looking.
But you didn't see it?
No.
And you did see the truck in front of you?
The SUV, yes.
Sorry, the SUV in front of you?
Correct.
All right. You didn't see a person standing or lying on the ground anywhere around that SUV, did you?
No.
But you did look inside that SUV?
As I passed by, yes.
And you saw one person?
That's all I saw at the time, yes.
Female with long hair, is that
Correct.
right? And you did not see anybody else inside that SUV?
No, not to my acknowledgement.
So there you have it, right? So only Karen Reed is in the car at that time, is what he's saying. Let's bring in our insiders. Joining us, Karen Reed supporter and creator of the Justice for Officer John O'Keefe and Karen Reed Facebook page, Nick Rocco. Still with us, attorney Rick Grundy, and the YouTuber behind Yellow Cottage Tales, Kevin Lenahan, is here. All right, Nick, put together the pieces that you believe the defense is trying to put together here about what happened. Like, what's the significance of the timing of the steps, when Nagel is there, and the timing of when Karen Reed and John O'Keefe arrived. Put it together for us here.
So the reason why he brought up the timestamps being basically Waze app might draw from one timestamp versus a different app might draw from a different timestamp is because some of those timestamps are 2, 3, some of even 4 minutes apart. So depending on which one the Waze data is using is going to ultimately decide what time he showed up there. Now, if it's an accurate time or if it's 3 minutes behind, that is going to be important because, like David Yannetti said, between 12:21 and 12:24, it shows 80 steps of most likely John getting out of the vehicle, going inside that house. The important part of the 12:23 text message is the time that Ryan Nagel arrives at 34 Fairview Road. Now, we know that he saw Karen's vehicle. We know that he didn't see anybody outside, and we know that he didn't see anybody in the car except for Karen Reed. So if they're saying that his phone stopped moving at 12:25, that means from the time Ryan Nagel got there, it took 2 minutes for his phone to stop moving, but yet he wasn't outside. So where was he? There's only one place he could have been if he wasn't seen by anybody. He had to have been inside that house. And now now we know. I think it's a correct timestamp that she gets to One Meadows Ave at 12:36 because that's when she connects to the Wi-Fi data, and that was a big discrepancy. It was at 12:41 to 12:36. So One Meadows Ave to 34 Fairview Road is a 7-minute drive on a good day. You know, there wasn't much snow, so I would say maybe it took her 7 to 8 minutes. So you take that away from 12:36, she had to have left that house at 12:29. And the time difference there, so if she arrives at around 12:23 to 12:29, she has 6 minutes. Ryan Nagel's outside with his sister for at least 2 minutes. So that gives a window of 4 minutes where she could have hit John O'Keefe. But the people that were outside with Karen say he wasn't out there.
Kevin Lenahan, tell me why, from your perspective, this doesn't make sense, because you've been talking about the timeline all along. Does the timeline still make sense, even if they're grabbing timestamps from different places?
The timelines are perfect, and they come from two sources, not one. They come from the Waze and also from the GPS. So the Waze data shows that Karen first gets to the turn to Fairview a few seconds before 12:24, but then she has to do that 3-point turn, which also correlates perfectly with the vehicle data we get later. So she turns around and comes back and then arrives at the intersection the same time as Ryan Nagel. Right now it's about 12:24. We don't know what time Ryan Nagel sent that text. We don't know where they were, when Ryan Nagel sent that text to his sister, but it'd be pretty normal that if you're pulling up to the street, that's when you send it, because you're going to be pulling up a few seconds later. So it matches up perfectly. Then at 12:25, what the trooper is actually saying is that's the last GPS coordinate that we see there. But then you have to combine all the data streams here and get this total picture, because the health app show on John's phone shows that it last moves at 12:32. Which is exactly 8 minutes after the 3-point turn, which correlates perfectly with the vehicle data. So it all correlates in a bulletproof way. John was never inside that house.
Okay, Rick Grundy, I want you to take a listen to voicemails that were left by Karen Reed on John O'Keefe's phone, and these are allegedly after she murders him. Let's listen.
John, I hate you! John, I'm here with your kids, and nobody knows where the you are, you pervert. Yeah, it's 1 a.m. I'm with your niece and nephew, you pervert. You're a pervert! John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit your niece. I need to go home. You are using me right now. You're another girl sleeping next to me. You're a loser. Yourself. John, I'm going to look at you.
Rick, what does a jury do with that? I see this as such a double-edged sword. I've been struggling with it all day long, trying to figure out what will the jury end up taking away from this. What do you think?
So we've been living parallel lives, I guess, for today, because I've been talking to everybody about it too. Again, it's a part of the conundrum that's been made by the prosecution for themselves. They're putting this forth to show a motive for an overcharged indictment. That she was angry, she was pissed, but as you say, the other side of that is, if she intentionally backed into him, then why is she calling 53 times? I don't think she's laying a plan out at this point in time that even though I know he's in a snowbank, dead or dying, I'll make these calls so nobody will think that I did it. I think that the jury's going to have to live with the fact that they cut against one another. But I think, again, I don't think this jury's going to get to the point of it was an intentional, premeditated act on her part. I'll tell you what frustrates me more in watching this today is if you look directly over Attorney Yanetti's shoulder when he's cross-examining, there's a gentleman sitting there that would testify, if forced to, that within an hour and a half of finding John O'Keefe's body, the defendant stated, and I'll quote it exactly, "I remember backing up and hitting something, but I can't say what it was." That person is Karen Reed's father. That statement was made in a recorded, audio recorded news statement with Ted Daniels, a local reporter who's there in the courtroom. So you put him on the stand, you put Ted Daniels on the stand, you put the videotape. This expert testimony is likely either it's going to have to be put to the side or it's going to pit the jury against one another. You've got that easy to digest evidence sitting right there, and for whatever reason, it's not happening.
It's not
so
happening.
The whole thing's making me crazy today, Vinny.
I can see it. I can feel it. Kevin Lenahan, I want to take a listen to the last voicemail one more time and give me your thoughts on it. Let's listen.
Gentlemen, this look at you.
Your thoughts, Kevin.
So let's set it up. At 5:18, Karen's picked up on surveillance cameras. She's about 4 or 5 minutes away from 34 Fairview. That comes at 5:23, and it sounds to a lot of people like she's saying, John, was that you? And then at 5:35, that's when she pulls up to the McCabe. So the timeline fits that she drove by right at that moment and saw John lying there. That could be the smoking gun.
Let's take one more listen to it.
Gentlemen, this look at you.
Nick, what are you hearing there? And what are your thoughts?
I mean, it is hard to make out. I hear, John, I just want to look at you. And when I was listening to it today, it was very hard to hear any of these voicemails being relayed through the camera into the TV. So actually, the first time I'm kind of hearing these is tonight. I don't really know what that means because, again, like Kevin just said, people are kind of hearing these differently. I hear, I just want to look at you because she's out looking for him, and so she doesn't know what happened. I mean, as far as these voicemails go, I think this is somebody who this has happened to before. We know about the Aruba incident where she's upstairs at 3 a.m. with the niece and nephew. He's downstairs, really drunk. She thinks he's, flirting with another girl, but he's not with her. And the same situation here. She now goes home to the niece. He's out drinking, partying again, and she's mad. She's leaving these voicemails. I hate you. You're a pervert. Again, she's assuming that he might be cheating on her. So as far as these voicemails go, I don't think the jury's going to weigh in too much on these compared to everything else that they have to look at. And one other thing I just wanted to say quick, Kevin, so if his phone stopped moving at 12:32, how did she get home in 4 minutes?
She's driving pretty fast, as we saw, so I think it's about a 5-minute drive, 4 or 5 minutes if you're going that fast.
Okay, the debate continues. Everyone's staying with us. When we come back, we'll talk about the medical examiner's testimony. Did the jury learn anything today?
Cause of death was blunt impact injuries of head and hypothermia.
And with reference to manner of death, what, if anything, did you list on Mr. O'Keefe's death certificate in relation to manner of death?
I listed could not be determined.
Investigators don't like that, but it's par for the course, right? You have to understand that medical examiners, they are separate. They work with law enforcement, obviously, all the time. But they are separate, and they come to their own opinions based upon their training, experience, etc. That's Dr. Scorty Bello. Let's take a listen to a little bit more of her testimony from today.
The manner of death has to do with the circumstances under which Mr. O'Keefe sustained those injuries. And I did not have enough information to be able to determine whether those injuries were accidental or not. The majority of the blunt force injuries were to the face and the head, as well as to the upper extremities, the arms. I do believe the injuries, the blunt impact injuries were sustained first. These are not injuries that are immediately lethal. This is not something that would cause death in seconds, and therefore Mr. Keefe may have been incapacitated by the injuries or knocked out, if you will, and was not able to get himself into a warmer environment, and therefore hypothermia set in, given the environmental conditions and given the clothing on the body, or the lack of clothing, I should say, no big jacket or anything like that.
All right, our insider's back with us. Nick, how much interaction is there between the medical examiner and Trooper Proctor?
Well, from what we heard, he was calling the office to relay the story to her through text messages with his coworkers and friends, them telling him he couldn't get the job done, whether it was sarcastic or not. It clearly seems like the goal for Michael Proctor was to get her to basically rule the manner of death a homicide, which she didn't. And one of the biggest things that I actually took away from her testimony today was, I've been hearing for the past few months, wait until you hear about all the damage to his pancreas and this and that, it's from the car. And we actually learned today that those are the signs of hypothermia. So I'm glad that was all cleared up. The only thing I think that was new to me today was he had, I think she said, like a 2-centimeter cut on his right knee. So as far as everything else goes, we've known the injuries, and I didn't really see much new.
Kevin Lenahan, what did you take away from the medical examiner's testimony today?
Well, if that nefarious, evil genius of our time, Michael Proctor, was so influential, then why did she list the manner of death as undetermined? I mean, she didn't know what was there, exactly how he died. She just knew that it was blunt force trauma, and then which led to hypothermia. She did say clearly that he was not in a fight, and anyone, even as an amateur that used to work in bars, I can tell you he was not in a fight. You could see it on his hands. So, and just quickly on the timeline, 12:31 would probably been the time that she hit him. 12:32 he last moves. That's a 5-minute drive home. The timeline matches up perfectly.
Rick Grundy, let me ask you, and so I don't know what the expectations will be of this jury, but shows like Quincy, you expect, and that might be a little too old for this jury, I don't know, but are there expectations from the jury that the medical examiner is going to come in there and is going to tell you what happened?
Yeah, I think there certainly are. Unfortunately, I'm not remembering the opening statements well enough right now to say whether or not either party boosted those to a level that could put him in harm's way. I will say that medical testimony, we saw it actually with this person that appeared supposedly out of the blue, which I think in an error, Judge Canoni is going to allow to testify. There are people with medical degrees that'll say pretty much anything. So this is an area where, as you said, the medical examiner is a non-biased party who comes in and honestly stated, this is what these injuries are consistent with. This is what they are not consistent with. But I can't tell you here exactly what happened. You have another woman who read a newspaper article, got on a plane from California, and is ready to jump on that stand and tell you that she's all but clairvoyant. So you need to, these are experts that you really need to be prepared to cross-examine thoroughly. I was a little disappointed to see that the prosecution, again, not that the medical examiner is going to sew your case up for you, but it seemed like they were having a conversation for the first time. And that's not the first time I've seen them present what can be very strong evidence for them in that manner. So that was a little bit of a disappointment.
So we're close to the end of the prosecution's case. The defense is going to be going, and as soon as the defense case starts, there's one constant drumbeat, and people wonder, will she testify? Karen Reed. Nick Rocco, one of the insiders. I know Matt Johnson's asking every day, what are you hearing about Karen Reed taking the stand, not taking the stand, and what she really wants to do?
So I know she wants to take the stand. I know she wants to tell her story and her side. I don't believe that Alan Jackson and David Yannetti are going to need her to take the stand. I think if she was to take the stand, it would be at a desperate attempt to try to convince this jury that she didn't do it. And I truly believe that the minimal experts and civilian witnesses that they're going to call is going to prove everything the defense needs to prove in this situation. And my belief is Karen is going to have a time and a place to tell her story, and it doesn't need to be in the courtroom on the stand.
Okay, we just have a couple seconds here. Just a number, 0 to 10. How strong was this prosecution's case? 10 is like Rick Grundy's trying Dr. Greinader again. 0 is like my first trial. I'll start with you, Nick. Prosecution case, 0 to 10.
I mean, I'm not going to say 0. And I'm not going to say 10, that's for sure. So I'll go with a 3. They attempted it. They attempted to pull off a cover-up. But, you know, they were able to get the taillight. But I would say a 3 at most.
Give me a number.
For second degree, 2, but for manslaughter, 9.
Okay. Rick, final.
The case there that they could have tried, I'll give a 7. Again, I'd like to knock it down and make believe the second wasn't ever there. The case that they did try, somewhere between a 4 and a 5.
Ooh, that's not good. Nick Rocco, Rick Grundy, Kevin Lenahan, thank you so much. We will obviously speak again.